Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Not Podcast, the best named actual podcast on the planet. And with me today, I have two Matts from Link Logistics, and they may be known as Good Matt and Bad Matt. I thought it was Good and Evil Matt. Should we leave it up to them to find out which one's which, or do you want to let the audience
the viewers decide at the end of this who's evil and who's good?
Okay,
that's fair.
Perfect. Why don't we start with some introductions from the two of you? Tell everybody who you are and what you do and why you're here.
Sure. Why don't you start?
Oh, sure. I am Matt Rand, one of the two Matts. I run the research and analytics group at Link Logistics, which is essentially our group for understanding market intelligence, what is changing in the market, how do we see around the corner and know what we want to own 5 years from now, not just today. We do a lot of data science to get there. We do some regular shoe leather work, et cetera. My background before that is in the public market. So I was at a hedge fund for 2 years, running a REIT book, long time on the long-only side before that, sell-side research. I was a journalist once, a bunch of things, but got to know the other Matt during my time as an investor. And, we had a whole bunch of conversations over the years about what would it look like to do data at scale, at a real estate company. And then it made sense. And here I am.
There you are. So my name is Matt Ostrower, commonly known as Evil Matt at Link Logistics, just to get that over with, as a CFO, so I'm the CFO there. I have, like Matt, a public markets background, both CFO at a couple of other public companies before this in retail, and before that, on the equity research side, both writing research and helping to manage a research department at Morgan Stanley. And I came to Link shortly before Matt. The reason why I left the wonderful companies that I was at was I was afforded the chance by Blackstone and Link Management to help invent the company of the future. So we were operating at a very quick scale. We and Blackstone especially accumulated billions upon billions of dollars of assets very, very quickly. And the goal was to use that scale and the data access and resources that it provided, and especially Blackstone's sponsorship, to build something really special, really differentiated. And from the very beginning, I think everyone agreed that one of the core competitive advantages was objective, data-driven in insights and analytics. So how can we make better decisions than everybody else? And that's how I ended up there. It's been now 6 years.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. And we're going to talk about data today. Probably talk about AI a bit because kind of have to talk about AI in every podcast now or in everything in life today, it seems. But you guys are doing some interesting things in data and AI, so I know that people will be interested in hearing it. And it's interesting to get that kind of perspective from a firm, that is as large as Link, part of Blackstone, because we have people from different walks of life and different size organizations here, and what you're able to do with the resources of a Blackstone behind you is certainly different from what somebody might just be able to do in a startup. And some of it might be the same. Some is going to be very different, right? And I think it'll be interesting to get the perspective of what you can do that others can't, and maybe what you can do that others can as well. So, and to that end, let's talk about kind of the landscape of commercial real estate companies. Everybody says they're investing in AI and in data right now. It seems like the results are really uneven or unclear. Why do you think that might be at this point?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it, and then Matt can add on. I would start by saying, I keep saying it feels like it's nerd day in real estate land, right? Because I think our time, the reason why Matt joined, the reason why I joined, I think we felt like something like this was going to happen. Obviously, we didn't have the exact viewpoint. We didn't know exactly how it was going to look, but we knew that data and data-driven insights were going to just increase in importance for a variety of reasons. And I think we both thought that AI and the improvement of technology would just kind of cause that trend to go, become even stronger. I would revise it from saying that it's nerd day on Wall Street to saying I think it's going to be nerd decades on Wall Street, right? The need for this stuff is becoming more and more clear with every day. And so people talk about it very understandably, because I think it's becoming blindingly clear what the art of the possible is, right? Especially with the advent of AI, the line between the 2 points becomes clearer and clearer and seems simpler and simpler. But I would say the AI journey for any company needs to start with, so-called eating your spinach, right? This is about, and this is something that we did at the very beginning, thank goodness, and it took us 3 years. It's developing your data, right? Making sure that you have infrastructure for the data, yes, and that's expensive and hard to do. But the really hard part is the process behind the data. One of my mantras is that data is not data. Data is process. And process is not technology. Process is humans. And so at the very beginning at Link, we started with our spinach, which was to identify what things we wanted to have from a data perspective and identify whether we actually had them or not. And if we did not have them, which in the majority of the data points that we wanted was absolutely the case, we did not have them in the form that we wanted. We had 70, 80 projects that we did over the course of a couple of years. We called it Project Infinity when we bundled them together. We did those projects and we made sure that we were able to generate clean, consistently defined, understandable data, and we were able to put it in all the right places so it could be accessed by the system. So that was the first few years of our existence. We started using that I jokingly say we went on an Excel extermination campaign, right? Stop everyone from calculating all these things themselves and doing it differently. Let's just all visualize the data together. So in the pre-AI days, we moved to visualizing data primarily through Power BI. We had some other applications that we used as well, some in-house applications. And I would say that was kind of like having a nice entree. And now with AI, because we've kind of built the culture at the company for wanting to use and understand the data. There's a curiosity there. There's an ability to access the data and ability to visualize it. Now that we've done all that hard work, we can now have our dessert. And I would say for us, AI is dessert. It's a bit of a terrifying dessert because we're all looking at our jobs and saying, oh my goodness, am I going to have anything to do? Is the computer going to do all of this? But whereas 6 months ago, I think I would have looked at AI and said, is this really going to happen? The use cases I'm seeing don't make any sense. We tried to use it. It wouldn't work. I would say in literally the last 2 to 3 months, we've almost gone hyperbolic on this. And we are reinventing even now without having really thought through the resulting strategy yet. We're in the process of doing that. But we're doing projects now to really reinvent whole end-to-end processes. And we're going to do that in weeks, not months. And that's the dessert, right? It's the really, really fun part of this is we can produce more efficient processes with less resources for sure. But more importantly, we can extract better and better and better insights out of that because the data is in a place where the AI can access it reliably and start reaching conclusions or helping us reach conclusions. Yeah. So companies that haven't done that work, right? Companies that didn't eat their spinach, it's kind of uncovering that problem now. Not an insurmountable problem. It just means you're a bit behind, right? And that's our goal at Link is to always be 2 to 3 years ahead of everybody else. We've done that work, so we're a bit ahead now. We'll not rest on our laurels, but everyone else has to now go and say, can I fix all my data so that I can have my dessert later on?
Yeah, and I think the risk or the opportunity, depending on how you look at it, is it is so easy to build a really slick dashboard right now. Like it's so easy to make something that looks beautiful. And you say, look at what I have and look at all of these components to it. And it's a lot like your Excel extermination comment. If you just use the front end and you just throw a lot of LLMs at something, you're not ensuring there's process there. You're not ensuring semantic control over what does a word mean? What is a definition? How is this metric calculated every time you use it? And that work, at least I like to think after the last few years, because man, it was hard to build the things that we had to do. I think that work creates that foundational layer of when we say, NOI, this is what NOI is. Sure. When we say, because otherwise, when you talked about everybody having the same thing, we would, we all just have slick dashboards now.
Right. Well, it's interesting to have gone through this process and to try to be years ahead of things requires an incredible level of commitment organizationally behind the data and C-suite commitment, and Evil Matt, your CFO, this may be the first and the last time that I have a data conversation with somebody on this podcast where the CFO of the company is having that conversation, right? It's very unique from what I'm seeing. Explain how that works. Like how did the organization get to a place where not only is there C-level commitment, but the CFO is getting into the weeds on data? I haven't seen that before.
Yeah. I mean, I would go so far as to say this may be the first CFO that you're talking to, but I think it will not be the last. And everything that I read and the other CFOs say in the tech sector that I meet, this is the future, right? And if people like me, if we all believe, as I and Matt do, that data is our future and it's going to be absolutely critical, and data analysis and the insights that come from that are going to be critical to the future, gosh, the CFOs better care. Right, and they better get involved, and they better be very focused. So, I think that from the very beginning at Link and before Link at Blackstone, there was this view that this could happen, that there was going to be a future where scale and data would go together and allow you to do really, really unprecedented and remarkable things, at least in the real estate space. Part of the reason why we did that and knew that was because we just looked across other companies, right? And I think we all know that real estate isn't always far ahead on these things. But if you look at analogies elsewhere, you can reach the conclusion pretty quickly. It was not a hard conclusion to reach. And we had a C-suite that and Blackstone especially, that both said this is something that is going to happen. We think it's important. We can develop a competitive advantage. It's very much embedded in both Blackstone's culture and ours. And then we said at our scale, we have the resources to do it. And I would highlight the importance of that scale. The scale accomplishes two things. One, it's access to data. We produce our own data that's very, very useful. And just as important as that is having the scale to buy things that are very expensive, right? I will not lie to anybody and say the data journey and then the AI and the Power BI, the visualization journey beyond that, that's not cheap either, right? And so being able to do that across a base of 400, 500 million square feet of assets is much more doable than trying to do that across a portfolio of 10 million square feet. So its scale becomes this advantage that we're also trying to leverage. So I think everyone in the C-suite saw this opportunity. Blackstone certainly inspired us, and we said, what can we do with this? And I think it became very clear to us once we started. We were starting from scratch. Once we started, we realized this is going to be a nitty-gritty journey where people like me are going to have to get really involved.
Got it. Interesting. So how does the infrastructure look today, and how does the process that goes with that infrastructure work? You know, you went from building awesome dashboards and leveraging the data to get everyone aligned on centralized thinking around what are the terms we use and how do we track it in things like Power BI, I think you mentioned, right? But now with AI, you're building dashboards on the fly, right? How does the way that people work with AI differ from the way that they've worked with your analytics tools in the past?
Maybe, Matt, I think you're a good case study for that. Why don't you talk about how your work life has evolved?
Yeah, if you told me how much of my time would be spent yelling at AI about the code that it's written, a year ago, I wouldn't believe you. But a lot of it is you build the structure, you build the foundation, and then you find, okay, what is the thing I'm actually trying to do? How does AI fit into it? Is it, hey, it can code faster for me or build something quicker or show me a visualization? Is it, hey, every time I'm trying to match this list of things to this list of things, most of them are easy and there's a few I don't really know, and I need somebody to look at a map and check it, or I need somebody to check, is this even feasible? Oh, great, I can add an LLM layer to do that, but it has to know the rules. And so you have to add a lot of structure around what it sees, what is the context it understands. Does it know how you define a building or a unit?
Right.
Or because if it doesn't, it's gonna very confidently tell you whatever
the
it
wrong
thinks.
answer is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say more broadly, the infrastructure is evolving along with the technology that sits on top of it. I would say today, a large portion of our staff now has access to AI-based tools like Claude, like Copilot, And we're increasingly through I think a pretty grassroots effort, getting from the bottom up people to use it more and more and more. People are developing their own tools, but just as importantly, we're reassessing our top-down strategy, and that really means looking at an end-to-end approach to things. How do I completely reinvent an entire process? And by the way, by reinvention, I do not mean automate. In some cases, there's a lot of automation that happens, but in most cases, again, with that eye towards data-driven insights, differentiated insights, what can we use this technology? How can we use it to develop better and better insights that help us make better and better decisions at every step along the way of that process? Just automating it without allowing people to see what their alternatives are and how to make a better choice,
Sure.
That's not very valuable, right? I mean, there's a one-time elimination of some resources. That is not really what we're after. And when I talk to tech company CFOs, a lot of them aren't really cutting their staff. They're just reallocating things, and they're making sure that they have people who are so-called AI native who can make better and better decisions with the tools that they have.
Right. And is everyone empowered to use these tools? And are they given the keys to the kingdom? Are they given all the data to work with? Or what are the constraints on it?
We have been judicious so far, so we have not just rolled out anything in a blanket way. I think our approach has been, and our CTO has a lot to say about this, but our approach has been, if you give someone a tool, make sure you're giving it to them in a way they can actually use it. So, and I think what we've discovered is, even with our more hands-on approach, just giving somebody Copilot doesn't mean they actually use it.
Sure.
We have to, just like with data and the respect for data and the desire for data and the curiosity that comes with that, just like building that culture, we need to build a culture of use and curiosity around AI. So before people get things en masse, we're making sure that they understand what they're getting and what we expect them to do with it. What is the art of the possible? And that means people from my teams sitting with them and saying, what do you do all day long? Where are your pain points, right? And literally they sit there together and show them how to fix a problem, right? And then I think, whereas early in this journey, people weren't really using it and we had to kind of push people, now we're getting inundated with requests and we're showing people, if teach a man to fish, they'll fish forever. We're trying to teach people how to fish. And I think we're having some real success at that, but it's an incremental rollout. It's not everybody all at one time. I would say that it is already, in a way that I would not have been able to predict, dramatically changing how work is done, the productivity of our people. I mean, I have people walk in my office pretty much all day long saying, I am now 5 times, 10 times more productive than I was before. And I did not think we were going to be here this quickly. I mean, really 3-6 months ago, I would have said, I don't believe it.
Do you feel like you are personally?
Not so much, honestly, right? I mean, I think, I tried to create my first dashboard this morning on Claude, right?
Yeah.
But I think, and what I discovered, right, is that is actually, it's easier than doing Power BI, but it involves its own nuance. It is still a somewhat specialized skill. And the conclusion I have reached is I need to use AI to understand the art of the possible. But if I'm the one doing the AI all day long, if I'm creating my own dashboards, I'm probably not using my time appropriately. I certainly use it for lots of things that I wouldn't have used it for before. But in terms of that really sophisticated process automation, dashboard generation, I'm talking to my team about that all day long, and they're the ones generating that stuff.
Yeah, interesting. I've been vibe coding. For those who don't know, vibe coding is just basically coding using AI.
Yeah.
And I don't think I necessarily thought I was going to be doing that, but it's so ridiculously easy to vibe code now that you don't need to know you don't need to know where to host it or how to host it.
Yeah.
You don't need I got API credentials from our team, and I just said to Claude, here's my API credentials. I want you to do this, 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 and this. And it just built stuff. Yeah. And I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's this danger that comes with that, right? I mean, I would call it the risk of the rabbit hole, right? Which we have at Link, where people are curious and they spend all day, and so really one of the key things we're grappling with now is the monitoring piece of this, right? How do I know? My view is that AI is going to give everybody 20 assistants to work with, right? 40 assistants to work with. Well, and that means even junior people become effectively managers of virtual
Yes.
people. And not everyone at a junior level is good at that. So how are they managing their time? What tasks are they assigning to those things? How do we make sure that people use this resource in a really responsible but efficient and productive way? Right. These are all things that are coming up. Those people
to
are
your
really
point, I think that like these tools are really good for somebody like me who's used to managing people. It's really good for managers because you're used to telling people do X. Oh no, I want it to look more like this. Oh, that's not right. It could do this. And it's like I can just tell the AI all the things I tell a person. And like I'm already attuned to sort of how I would think about directing someone or something to do something.
Yeah.
It works out very nicely in that regard. I guess I get to tell it what to do, and I don't have to be nice to it either.
And whenever it doesn't work out, you can tell it to write a rule for itself so that it never does that again.
Yes, I'm like, don't make that mistake again. Absolutely,
again, right.
Yes, absolutely. So I get a kick out of that, and I've heard feedback from a lot of people, and I found this myself that I'm not working fewer hours because of AI.
Correct.
I'm working more hours because I'm doing it because I'm an intellectually curious person and it's fun. And so I spend time at night and on the weekends building stuff because it's fun to do. And I think a lot of people are actually working more hours now,
100%.
doing a lot more, getting a lot more done than they were, disproportionate to those hours, but spending more hours.
Our AI native people, many of them tell me they can't stop. Right, they're literally sneaking home late at night, going in the bathroom, and and coding while they're sitting in the bathtub or something. So it's and I think I think that comes with a lot of wonder and excitement. It's also coming with a level of overwhelmedness. Right, what does this mean for my future? Those are all really good natural questions, and we don't all have all those answers. What I do feel very clear about is those AI native people we have, and many of them are younger, but they span the gamut. Those AI native people just became 10 times more important to the functioning of our company and the advancement of all those competitive advantages that I'm talking about. Their ability to make an impact on things. I mean, people spend a week and they can generate $20 million of enterprise value, right? I mean, it's really, really remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get a little more specific. I want to talk about this platform that you guys have built in-house, leveraging AI, leveraging data, which is called Olinda. Maybe tell us what Olinda is and what that stands for. And let's dig into it a bit.
Sure. So it does stand for optimized learning for industrial assets, but that was in my heart never what it stood for. It was it all came from an Italo Calvino novel where Invisible Cities, where it's Marco Polo and Genghis Khan having this set of conversations about Genghis Khan's empire. And along the way, they have this whole conversation about, well, maybe if I come up with all of the right rules and algorithms, I will completely understand my empire. I will never have to go and see it. I can just do it from sitting here. And then, and they're doing this over a game of chess. And then, Marco Polo's like, well, here's the thing. And he starts talking about the chessboard and the, piece of wood and where that was cut down and the family of the people who cut it down. And then right after that, the next city he talks about is Olinda. And so it to me kind of really resonated with this moment where we were sort of in between the human and the not human. And so what we've built is essentially a set of models that work together that attempt to look at a building the way a person would, figure out what gives it value. Is it because it has more dock doors? Is it because it's in this part of town? And how will that change in the future? So we want to be able to value any industrial building in the country, at least know what it would rent for today, 10 years ago, in the future, et cetera, and figure out not just what it would be, but why. It's not as easy to do as it sounds, but that's what it is.
For the record, it doesn't sound easy to me.
Yeah. I don't think many of your peers would say it's easy as well. So, can you do that? Can you tell us what every property rents for or should rent for today and 10 years from now?
We can tell you. I mean, it depends how error tolerant you are.
We'll give you a number.
Yeah, we'll give you a number. And it's funny. Like we're actually about to roll out our third kind of major iteration of like reinvent. We keep rebuilding it from within. And what this version is going to be much better at is saying, on this one, we know within 20%. That's
Sure.
a lot. on this one, we know within 5% that's less, and give you a much clearer sense of where things are. But I would say in bulk, so if you were trying to understand, hey, what is this submarket doing? It's incredibly accurate. If you wanted to know, pick a building at random, it really can depend on how similar is that building to other buildings, how much data do we have. Thank you. You give us a lot, and what can we understand about how that building relates to the market?
Right. So, but you guys are using it to price your spaces in your buildings, right?
Yes, I mean, to varying degrees. Again, I think one of the things we've learned about this is that it is a model that can produce a number on any building in the United States, but it is not meant to automate a process, right? It is meant to be, like almost all of the data we use, another objective voice in the room. And teaching people how to use predictive analytics like that is an actual real thing. And it's hard. It involves cultural change. I think people are always wary that we're trying to replace them with some model, which has never been the intention. We always say we want to produce that voice in the room, or we want to turbocharge them and allow them to make even better decisions. But helping someone to understand, hey, this is really reliable for pricing a space in, say, Atlanta, where there's enormous liquidity of leasing, versus Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there's one trade every 3 years. That's something that you have to, and giving people signals from the data, visualizations that help them see this is a more reliable number than this, and how do you signal that in a way that they will find credible. These are all things that are very much live and work in progress for us. But to answer your question, yes, we are using this on a real-time basis to make a bunch of really important decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And those important decisions, so part of it is the rent you charge for the spaces that you're leasing out, right? And part of it's also determining the value of assets that you want to buy, or which assets to buy?
Well, it's when you look at a market and you look at a set of assets, it's what should they rent for? What will they rent for in the future? What are other buyers assuming when they,
right?
when they're buying things? And one use would be, gosh, we have a weekend to look at a massive portfolio. Where do we even start? Where should we spend time? Well, we can put that portfolio right into the machine and get out a whole whether somebody wants to look in Excel or in an app or in raw data. Here's what we think we know about all of these buildings. Here's what we think we know about what they would rent for, and then maybe you figure out, okay, actually these 17 assets I really have to spend time on and not the rest. That's one use case. Another might be, hey, we're seeing this trend we think on the ground. Is that consistent with what we are seeing in that sort of submarket in other markets, right? And we can do a quick comparison. Or, hey, have you noticed that there are all of these companies, from the electrical industry leasing space near data centers that are under construction, right? Like, we all can kind of see it, but we can make that light up on a map in every market where it's happening. And so it's there are a lot of different ways that you can come to an understanding more quickly about a space, but there's nothing like we're not a quant fund, right? It's not like you press a button and we're flipping buildings on it. So it's like this is very much a how do we arm the people who are making decisions with the best information we can get them.
And I'd like to clarify a couple of things for the listeners. One is that it is not the input for pricing a space. It is one input of many inputs for pricing a space. Again, another voice in the room. There's nobody at Link or Blackstone who says, "Oh, that's the Olinda number. That's what I'm using." That's not the intention of it.
Right, yeah.
And the second is that, contrary to what you might hear about, like a lot of yield management models, which are just looking at other prices and trying to optimize other prices for this price, this is using dozens upon dozens of variables. It's really a bottom-up, fundamentally calculated number, right? So it's not just, this isn't just meant to be, what are all the other prices and how do you come up with a price based on that? It's really meant to say, fundamentally over time, what drives the price of a building, what drives the price of a space, and trying to put together a pretty darn complicated model to come up with an estimate based on many, many variables.
That's such an important clarification you made, and I think it's one of the things that we've found as we rolled it out, as we've worked with the company, is it's not necessarily intuitive to people who are in a seat where, say, they're leasing or investing, that nobody's trying to make their job harder. We are actually just trying to make their job easier. And, can we give you the raw material to look at something, be as informed as you would be anywhere, right? You're going to know more than anybody else knows about this building, and then do your thing, right? We're trying, we had to spend a lot of time, I think, and it never ends. The change management layer of this, but sitting with people who are in the field, leasing space and saying, you know more about this than we do, right? Like, we totally respect how much expertise you have. Like, you are here to do that. Nobody's going to do that for you. Yeah. But what we can do is give you enough information that you know more than anybody you're talking to when you're having your conversations in the field. Free you, and you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time in Excel to do that. So we'll free you up to go out and do your job. And it's not always their instinct that's what it would be, right? And so it's a really important kind of symbiosis to build, and it takes real work.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I used to live in a rental building that used a revenue management system, right, yeah. And I was astounded by how little power the people in the leasing management office had. Right. They were empowered to do nothing. The software controlled their lives and told them what the rent was going to be, and they could do nothing. And it lent itself to the least common denominator person who knew nothing, which ultimately is fine. If you've got hundreds of units, you don't need to have an expert that gets everyone right. You just need to get it right in aggregate.
Right.
But in industrial real estate, what's your average lease size?
150,000 square feet.
Yeah, you don't want to screw up one of them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to screw up any particular deal in the spirit of getting them all right. You want to get every deal right perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And so it's worth the investment in the humans.
Right. It's not a 1-year commitment. It's a 5 to 10-year commitment in many terms. And if that's what exactly the point I was trying to make is, if that multifamily, for example, or self-storage revenue management is on one side of a spectrum, this is really on the other side of the spectrum, both in terms of how it is calculated. It's not a simplistic calculation based on one data source. It's many, many data sources, and it's a fundamental calc. And then also in terms of the intended usage, right? We expect we're trying to help people make better decisions. We want the people to make the decisions.
Sure. How many data sources are in there? I mean, we all know which one is the best, but I just mean how many data sources and factors go into this?
A lot. It depends what you think of as a data source, right? So we sign leases, we're a data source, right? We negotiate leases, we're a data source on the in-process stuff. We get a lot of things from people in the field who hear a tidbit here or hear a tidbit there, and they can, enter it in. And that's all sources of leases. But how do we enrich those leases by knowing where they happen, right? What do we do to know, whether the shape of a building makes it more useful for one kind of customer than another kind of customer, right? Well, the building shapes you can get. There's wonderful open source sources out there. The uses from the industry side might be a little trickier. We have a council of supply chain experts that we've convened, and we talk to them 4 times a year. And they let us ask very embarrassingly dumb questions about what happens inside warehouses, so that we can understand how's that space going to be used. We then figure out, okay, that gives us some intuition on how this building configuration might work. Are they a source? I guess they're a source. It's like there's a tremendous amount of that happening. But anything you can think of that would tell you where are buildings, where are points of interest, what are the characteristics of the people that live and work in an area, all of that stuff, building sales, et cetera.
Got it.
And remember, we're in a net lease business, so you have the whole slew of operating expense data sources that go on top of that, because we have to be able to make that calculation.
Absolutely.
So property taxes, for example, Matt's got an amazing, database of property taxes. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And I would say, look, we are using this. It is still in the early innings, right? We are still trying to figure out how to use this the best way, how to get people comfortable with it, how to make sure our estimates are more and more accurate. I think Matt's newest model is going to get us even closer there. But it's getting the model in as good a place as you can, and then also doing all that change management with the people who have to use it. And it's a journey. It's a multi-year journey.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So maybe you could tell us from a practical standpoint, how are you ultimately building acquisition decisions today as compared to 5 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say there is we are Blackstone's U.S. industrial or North American industrial platform, and they are, we are owned by funds that they manage, and they are making the investment decisions at the end of the day everywhere. Now, it's a pretty good partnership that we have with them, with our investment teams and their investment teams, but what we're essentially trying to do is get them the best information we can as fast as possible, right? So it's that is more of the, hey, what can we tell you about a portfolio that you're looking at, so that you know where to spend your time, right? Because they only have so much time, right? So how do they know when they really do want to dig into something or not? That's easy. Can we filter to find, like we are kind of, most of our effort right now is on a signal detection project, which is at many levels, but it's essentially, how do we always know what's happening as soon as it happens, but never identify things that are not happening as happening, right? So identify every true positive and no false positives, right? And then and obviously that's not achievable, but you can get close. And can we take those things and bubble them up really fast to Blackstone to work with? Can we go to our teams and say, hey, you're out there talking to owners, look in this submarket or in this size category because something is really happening there, or here's a list of people you might call, for whatever it is. So it really spans. Can you say spans the gamut? It runs the gamut. Yeah. It runs the gamut.
Well, and I would say also it's tempting to look at this on that micro level and look at this one building. But where this data becomes, especially in these early innings where we're trying to aggregate results, it becomes helpful on a more macro or semi-macro level, right? So what markets? So we have people who work on acquisitions all across the country. We have people who do leasing all across the country. They are all incredibly wise professionals. They have a view on what's going on in their markets and what the next year to 2 years of fundamentals or beyond that look like. Very good views, educated, thoughtful. Matt's model allows us, especially at that aggregate level, whether it's Atlanta as an example as a whole or some submarket within Atlanta as a whole, that's where the numbers start to get really compelling. And we end up in these very useful conversations where, say, the acquisitions person is bearish on a market and the model is saying something more bullish. Doesn't mean the model's right and the acquisitions person is wrong. It's about stimulating that debate and understanding what the nature of the disagreement is.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this to me once before, that you guys have somewhat of a unique model in the way that the data has a seat at the table in the investment committee. Could you talk about how that actually takes effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of what Matt was just saying in terms of we show everything we know about something that's happening, and I think if the data shows something very different from what an investor is trying to say, or if somebody decided, hey, I'm only going to pick a couple of lease comps that make this deal look great, like that's not going to hold up very well, right? So they're incentivized to really try to actually get it right, which is quite helpful. And I think that those conversations around, hey, the data says this, but the team says this, when they align, that's really powerful. And when they don't align, I think what it really helps us figure out, and I was thinking this when you were just talking, it really takes me back to my public market days, but know what you are betting on. Like never accidentally bet on something in your portfolio, right? And so if we can figure out through one of those debates, like, hey, we're willing to override the data or override the person here because we think, this or that, as long as we're doing that intentionally, right? Because we think, well, here's why that's misleading or it's oversimplified or whatever it is. I think that we can invest very well. You just never want to do that accidentally, right?
Can you think of specific examples where that happened, where the consensus around the table from, the gut instincts of the team were X and the data just didn't pan out and it fundamentally changed the decision that was made?
I think we should probably be a little careful about getting too far into the weeds.
There are some live ones, but yeah.
But I mean, it really does happen. I'd rather not get into exactly who said what. But over the last couple of months, we've just had really good debates, and I think everyone walks away feeling, and rather than, gosh, I disagree with the model, there's something bad about that, people kind of feel like we had a more in-depth, robust conversation, so we understand what, as Matt said, what decision we're making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's been a decent amount of cultural resistance to this, or have people really embraced it?
I would say both. In short, both. There is a natural, this is a human condition, and the more that I do this and read about it and try to educate myself, it's very easy to get, as the person sitting here working on all this infrastructure and trying to get the data in people's hands, it's very easy to get frustrated with people. But the reality is, I think I would do the same in everyone's shoes, right? And so really this starts with having empathy for where people are coming from. And look, we've had some big successes in getting people to align to it, and we've had some failures. And usually the failures are tied to either there's something just really wrong with the data we're distributing, and people are like, that's not okay, or we're being heavy-handed in how we think people should use it, and just saying we're right and you're wrong. Those were mistakes that we made really early on. But you make those mistakes early on, and you live with them for years, right? And so we're still trying to undo some of those original mistakes that we made.
Yeah, I think it when you first roll something out, if it has any merit to it, and maybe it's something you built with AI, or maybe it's AI itself, maybe it's just a simple model, if it kind of works, people immediately think, well, that's pretty good, right? And then they are like, that better always be right now, because it's the mechanical thing that's it's perfect. And as soon as it makes a mistake, or they see a mistake, if a person made that mistake, they might think, you had an off day, or let me show you how to do it right. But if the model makes the mistake, they're like, whoa, I thought this thing was going to get everything right. Like
the expectation of accuracy from a model is much higher than the expectation of accuracy from a person.
I always compare it to the self-driving car, right? Self-driving cars are so much safer than humans driving, right? The incidence of accidents is incredibly low, but the tolerance level for people dying in an accident from a self-driving car is pretty much zero, right? Like the standard is just so high when it's a machine that is at the
it's an unfairness, and we can either rail against the machine, as it were, or we can do one of the things I've learned working at a big company like this is there's ways to do things, right? And the corporate term for this is change management, right? Meet people where they are, explain why you're trying to change something, explain how it's changing, explain what you expect from them, get feedback from them, but do this all with a great deal of humility, right? And I think we've all learned a lot about that. Trying to do this.
I think, in my old job, you would have so much instant feedback from the market, right? You knew when you were right, you knew when you were wrong. We would get statistics on exactly how often we were each. And, you needed to know, because you'd make hundreds or thousands of decisions a year. How do I improve that? And if I'm wrong, let me find out immediately so I can fix that, right? And there was this, if you were to just pick any hedge fund investor off the street, I think you'd be surprised by how aware of their frequent wrongness they are, right? And they know it, and they expect it, and they want to fix it. And in the real estate industry, you have people who've bought something and they wait 10 years, and like it probably went up because you borrowed money against it. And so it's not the same incentive structure, and I think it was. I think not kind of respecting that it wasn't the same incentive structure caused some of those early mistakes that we just figured everybody was going to just want to have whatever information they could have, whether it was helpful or not, like just give me more. But that's not always how it works.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you guys are Blackstone. You've got the world's most sophisticated, experienced real estate investors sitting around the table.
Exactly.
These people, rightfully so, think that they know how to do their job.
That's right. That's right.
They're quite good at it.
Well, and and it's worth mentioning. We have. There's two worlds we live in. The Blackstone appetite for this kind of information is enormous, and it's incredibly inspiring and empowering. Right. So when we give one thing, the question is always, there's 5 more questions on top of that, and they're all really good questions. So it just inspires producing more more and more and more. I would also distinguish the data culture around backward-looking data is much easier, right? When you're saying it's something historical, and our firm has responded really enthusiastically to that, and they're responding more and more enthusiastically to the forward-looking stuff. But predictive analytics are a unique conundrum.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, we're running short on time. I'm going to skip over some of the things I wanted to talk about, and let's close it out a bit. Tell us, where do you think we are in the CRE data maturity curve, and specifically as it relates to applying technology to that data? Are we early on? We maturing? How far along are we?
Please.
I think we're early. I mean, I think if you like think about a building feature that suddenly makes something Class A in a way that's like really special, and then what is it? 10, 15 years later, not having that makes you obsolete, but everything else has it. I think it's the data that's out there now is going to cause faster decisions and more decisions, and that's going to have a whole kind of knock-on effect of causing more of itself in a way, and then you suddenly can't compete with it if you don't have it. And that's a while away. Like, we're still very early on that.
The analogy I like to give is just to be provocative and something that's tangible is the evolution of the stock market, right? I mean, it wasn't always that billions of shares traded and you had incredible liquidity all over the place. Rewind back to the 70s, people had paper spreadsheets that they were filling out and stocks traded by appointment. And when you kind of think about how did you start there and end up where we are today, a lot of it had to do with the technology changing, right? And that technology didn't have the same impact, had some impact, but not the same impact on real estate stocks. I would say that AI is going to be an accelerant, especially to the transaction of real estate, right? It takes 6 months to trade an asset sometimes. Why does it take 6 months? And if you look at each one of those steps, AI has a role to play in each one of them. It's very expensive transaction, very time consuming. If we can compress 6 months to 3 months, 3 months to 1 month, I think the end product of that is going to be more trading of these assets, which in itself generates more data. The codification of that process will generate more data. And as we know, that's a flywheel. Once you start generating more data, that begets more data on top of it. So I think that our future is more liquidity. It's AI affecting the whole process, compressing timelines, making it easier and cheaper to do things. That will generate more data, and more data is going to really put a premium. Like I said, we'll finish where we started. It's not nerd day, it's nerd decade, right? Those people who want to make better and better decisions, who are intellectually curious, who want to be objective and use the data to make a better decision, those people who also have access to the data to make that decision are going to be the winners in that environment. And that is really the whole vision that we've had at Link.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, I've always heard this analogy of people say, oh, you can't do that in commercial real estate. You have to walk the building. You have to walk the building.
Right.
You have to see the asset, blah, 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 blah. But as you're explaining it, right, the stock market moves, in milliseconds and in less than milliseconds. And companies are a lot more complicated and different from each other than real estate assets are, right? The two real estate assets are much more similar than two different technology companies,
That's
for
correct.
instance, and yet we're able to do it with companies. Certainly, it would make sense that we should be able to do it with buildings.
I think it's coming. I really do think that's certainly the bet that Matt and I have made, and I think collectively Blackstone and Link have made that is the future that we're trying to be ready for.
Yeah.
So you guys are well along that path to get there. What should other firms be thinking about that are maybe much earlier in the trajectory and want to make their first step to try to be more like you?
Also, to go back to the beginning, to me, it's eat your spinach, right? Mm-hmm. Understand what data you have, what the quality of that data is, and then really importantly, what data do you want? And that's not a complicated process in terms of trying to make some decisions, right? We started at the beginning, by creating a business glossary. And we said, what terms are going to be important to us? And how do you want to define each of those terms? And many of us senior people spent dozens and dozens of hours in rooms over the space of 6 months defining all these things. Once we had once we had the glossary and those definitions, we looked at each one and we said, do we have the data for that? No. Is that the way it's being calculated today? No. How are we going to? So, and that's where Project Infinity came from. We went down each one of those terms and said, how can we make sure that we have the human processes behind this? And now you could say in some cases AI processes behind it. But how do we have the general processes at our company to produce the data we need to generate, the analysis that we want to produce? So start with your spinach, get your data house in order. And I think a lot of people and there's a lot of companies that are conflicted here who are trying to sell people really easy, fun sounding AI solutions. But if you layer that on top of bad data, you're going to get garbage, right? So
absolutely. Well, I think it's a great place to leave us off.
Thank you.
Thank to both of you for joining. And for everyone listening or watching, well, you already may know how to find us. But if you found us on social media, then you can follow the Not podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on social media at CompStak on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, X, formerly Twitter, and any other social media you can try us on. We may or may not be there. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.